mechanical malfunction. Taiwan's Air Force gives more details on what caused Monday's Mirage 2000 jet crash. A costly move? The US issues China with another warning not to help Russia. Pain at the pump. The price of petrol hits a 7-year high. Why this could just be the beginning. Plus, plunged into darkness. A string of power outages has some asking whether Taiwan's power grid is up to the task. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Taiwan's Air Force says a mechanical malfunction likely caused a Mirage 2000 fighter jet to crash off Taiwan's southeastern coast on Monday. It's the second Taiwanese fighter jet to crash in 3 months, and the incident is raising concerns about the state of Taiwan's Air Force. Jaime Ocon reports.
Mayday relay, Mayday relay.
More trouble in the skies above Taiwan. On Monday midday, Taiwan's military lost contact with one of its Mirage 2000 fighter jets during a routine training exercise. The Air Force says that the pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Huang Chongkai, reported a mechanical failure involving the plane's engine and ejected from the plane in waters off the southeast coast of the island. Officials have assured the public that the pilot is safe and in a good condition.
思考整个判断整个飞机的操作是正常的，它才有在正常情况之下拉射、弹射头柄，然后顺利弹射跳伞离开飞机，然后到海上的求生它也很落实啊，所以它没有伞衣照领，它人跟伞分离，它都有做操纵嘛。
The incident is the 8th involving Taiwan's Mirage 2000 since they entered service in 1997. The aircraft is more than 20 years old, but the Air Force has grounded the entire fleet of over 50 Mirage planes for inspection. Taiwan's military has around 600 aircraft at its service, and the Mirage 2000 planes are commonly used to intercept Chinese military jets that enter Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. On the same day as the Mirage incident, 13 Chinese warplanes entered Taiwan's ADIZ. The group included 1 radar plane and a dozen advanced fighter jets. Taiwan has seen 54 days of Chinese incursions, totaling more than 240 planes this year. With close to 1,000 planes entering Taiwan's defense zone last year, there's a push to modernize the island's air force.
显现出换样战机的确可能在我们的现在的后勤补给上来说的确是有点压力过重，然后或者说是的确可能没有办法及时得到或者说在这个后勤妥善率上来讲，的确是有值得空军注意的地方。
The Air Force says that for the time being, it will use domestically built indigenous defense fighters and F-16s to respond to Chinese incursions. The hope is that they can continue to defend Taiwan's sovereignty without losing any more fighter planes. As Nai Zhou and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
For more on what the Mirage 2000 crash means about the condition of Taiwan's Air Force, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to William Chung, a security expert at the government-run Institute for National Security and Defense Research in Taipei. He asked whether the crash is a sign of strain on the Air Force and what it can do to alleviate the pressure from almost daily Chinese incursions.
I will not call it a strain because it's just like if you have put more plane in the air, of course it will get this kind of the accident. It will increase this kind of the accident, and I would think I will see it in an individual case. I will not think in because the there are too many so many PL Air Force come here, and that's caused this kind of problems. Of course, I think the Mirage, for example, Mirage 2000 is a kind of the aircraft nearly, I think, 30 years old. It's really need to, its maintenance is always cause a concern from the Taiwan's Air Force. So I think, in general speaking, as I said, I will not call it. It's really a kind of strength. I would say when you put more airplane in the air, then you will have understandably, it will cause a more accident there.
So How has Taiwan's Air Force adapted or managed the increasing number of Chinese planes that are entering Taiwan's ADIZ?
My understanding. The first is, of course, when they send, it will depend on what kind of the airplane the PRA send. We will not always send our best, the fighters to intercept the PRA's Air Force. Otherwise, it is not worse. So, for example, sometimes we will send some, slow flying or not the kind of the second line, the fighter like F5E, something like that, to intercept. That is the first. It depends on what kind of the Air Force, what kind of plane come, and we will, respond. We will not always respond our best air fight, the fighters. So I think the Taiwan's Air Force, we are modernized in two perspectives. One is, of course, the platform, the fighters, and the second is, I think we increase the kind of the land-based air defense, because the special conditions in the Taiwan Strait, if you want to deny the PRA's fighters.
Fires tore through factories in Taoyuan in northern Taiwan and Tainan in the south early on Tuesday. The fire at a Taoyuan industrial park enveloped a factory that packages motor oil and spread to a neighbouring furniture factory. Authorities are investigating the cause of the fire, though local members of the public say they suspect it began in a truck parked next to the oil factory. In Tainan, meanwhile, there was a fire at a warehouse belonging to Everest Textile Company. The company is known in Taiwan for making the coat that President Taiwan wore while campaigning. No one was injured in either of the fires, which come a day after another blaze in Taoyuan at a logistics centre that belongs to the French supermarket chain Carrefour. The US says it has warned Beijing that helping Russia economically or militarily in its war with Ukraine would be costly for China. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan conveyed the message during a 7-hour meeting with China's Foreign Policy Chief Yang Jiechi in Rome on Monday. The US earlier reportedly told Western and Asian allies that it had determined that China has signalled to Russia it would be willing to provide military support for its campaign in Ukraine. But Moscow and Beijing have denied that Russia requested military equipment from China. TaiwanPlus reporter Louise Watt spoke to Chen Liangzhi, an associate research fellow at the Institute for National Defense and Security Research, a think tank in Taipei. She started by asking him if we are likely to see China provide support to Russia's military.
So far, I think it's still not very clear to see China can provide any military or economic assistance to Russia. So I think the best policy for Beijing is to stand neutral in the middle, because that's best to Beijing to show its positions to kind of compromise with the West and the US. But China still can conduct on-the-table aid to Russia, also assist Russia militarily and economically. That would be most positives to Russia. So I think Beijing is conducting a kind of two-handed strategy at this moment.
How easy would it be for the United States to isolate China in the event that it did support Russia's military?
That would be much easier for the US and the West to learn the experience from the case of Russia and the Ukraine war this time. For example, the US and the West can cut off imports to China from outside and exports from China to the globe. So US and China can copy the same way, take the same or similar strategy from the Russia case to deal with, to blockade or to isolate China's economy. But unavoidable, because US and the West and China, they are quite interdependent with each other. So the US and the West will be also damaged too if the US and the West take the isolation's strategy toward China.
Russia and Ukraine are set to return to the negotiating table on Tuesday after a technical pause in peace talks announced the day before. On the ground in Ukraine, the fighting continues. Drone footage captured by Ukraine's National Guard shows the extent of the destruction inside the city of Mariupol. A convoy of 160 civilian vehicles managed to flee on Monday. In the capital, Kyiv, Russian shelling hit an apartment block, killing at least 2 and injuring dozens. 2 more were killed in a Russian attack on an aircraft factory and a nearby residential building. Ukraine has accused Russia of firing on civilians trying to leave the city. An employee at Russia's state-run Channel-1 TV station staged an anti-war protest during the evening news on Monday. The woman, Marina Aksgadyukova, interrupted the live broadcast, shouting, "Stop the war" and "No to war." She held up a sign behind the anchor that read, "Don't believe the propaganda" and "They are lying to you here." The head of Russian human rights group Agora says the protester was an editor at Channel 1 and that she was later arrested. Under a new law, people in Russia who publicly challenge the government's claims about the war in Ukraine may face up to 15 years in prison. In a video recorded before her protest, Aksgadyukova said her father is Ukrainian and that she feels ashamed of working to spread Kremlin propaganda. The European Union has approved a 4th set of sanctions to punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. As sanctions take their toll in Russia, Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick discussed how Asian economies can play a part. He spoke with Alexander Akimenko, co-founder of Stanford University's Ukrainian Emerging Leaders Program, and asked why companies in Taiwan should consider severing ties with Russia.
First of all, reputational losses. Secondly, do not have the world ban and obstruction because the companies which will stay in Russia and continue to work and to pay taxes should understand that they, by their taxes, they are sponsoring the bombs which are killing Ukrainian civilians right now. Every dollar which is paid by any company which continue to work in Russia will sponsor world terrorism. Any one of you, any company, any person can do and make difference according to their own choice. So please, if you have any influence or reputation among Taiwan companies, urge them to leave Russian market now.
You're still in Ukraine itself, and you said earlier that you have no plans to leave the country. So how optimistic are you about emerging from this war victorious?
I think that we already won this war because the amount of sanctions and the consequences for Russia and Russian citizens and people all around the world, and including inside of Russia, is catastrophic. The country will fall down in around a month or so. So it will be economically disastrous for Russian population. And I think it can lead to the change of regime. So I want to believe that China and Chinese government will not put their strength and force to the loser in this battle, but to the winner. So I think that having the pros and cons of this decision, they have to think about their economical success and their economical consequences of this after the war ends. And in case they will support Russia, the economical success will be much weaker, much smaller if they will agree with the United States position and stay neutral or support Ukraine.
Why do you think it is that Ukraine has been able to resist Russian invasion so effectively up to this point?
This is unbelievable how people are motivated, how people are strict, firm in protecting their own home, their own land, and their own families. Because this is not a question of politics. They came to our land, they're killing our relatives, our friends, and this is the reason why Ukrainian army is so strong, because they have everything to lose in this war, everything. That's why they're protecting their land very, very seriously.
Rising oil prices driven by the war in Ukraine could see annual inflation in Taiwan rise to 2.5% this year. That's according to Taiwan's National Development Council. The pain is already being felt at the pump, with octane 95 fuel hitting a 7-year high at the beginning of the week. James Chater reports.
The economic butterfly effect. Ripples from Russian President Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine are reverberating through the global economy, with the price at the pump in Taiwan the latest to feel the impact. Prices for all types of fuel in Taiwan have risen since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began, with the price of octane 95 reaching a 7-year high this week of 33.1 Taiwan dollars per litre. That's around $1.16. Countries around the world are dealing with soaring energy costs, with New Zealand, Spain, Brazil and the United States all experiencing fuel price spikes. US President Joe Biden made clear who he thought was responsible.
Make no mistake, the current spike in gas prices is largely the fault of Vladimir Putin.
But the concerns in Taiwan are wider than just fuel prices. The national government has extended a freeze on the price of natural gas until April. 10% of Taiwan's supply is imported from Russia. The 15-month freeze is now the longest in history. Taiwanese lawmakers are also concerned about the conflict's impact on the semiconductor industry. Ukraine is estimated to produce around 50% of the world's semiconductor-grade neon, but Taiwan's economic minister reassured the country's legislators.
厂商目前在国内的库存其实都充足。2014的克里米亚战争的时候，他们其实也有去分散相关的来源。
Even eggs in Taiwan have been caught in the costly crossfire. They're now at a 3-year high. And it's those higher everyday prices that has left some worried that Taiwan's Consumer Price Index, a gauge of the cost of everyday products, could rise to 2.5% this year. The ripples of price hikes in Taiwan are but a small sign of how countries around the world are also paying the price for Putin's war. Alex Chen and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
A major blackout earlier this month left millions of households in Taiwan without electricity for hours. Since then, there have been a series of other power outages, and that's raising concerns about the stability of Taiwan's electricity grid. Eric Gao reports.
In early March, over 5 million households went without power across Taiwan. The state-owned electricity supplier, Taiwan Power Company, put it down to human error and equipment issues. But since then, there have been other power outages, including at the Taipei Taoyuan International Airport, Taiwan's main international gateway, and at the National Palace Museum's southern branch in Jiayi County. On Monday morning, a fire at a power plant in the northern city of Hsinchu disrupted power in nearby areas, causing panic among locals.
With the
recent blackouts, there are calls for Tai Power to improve and upgrade. Tai Power has already announced a 100 billion NT, or almost $3.5 billion US plan, to improve the resilience of its power grid. The government has also defended Taiwan's overall record for supplying electricity, releasing a statement saying the number of outages has gone down by some 60% over the past decade.
设备的这个维护老旧等等，那这个难免都会有。那我们跟很多国家比起来，其实台湾这样的故障的比率，其实在国际上表现其实是好的。
But infrastructure and equipment issues may not be the only problems threatening Taiwan's power supply. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has disrupted fuel supplies, and the resulting hike in prices could soon impact Taiwan consumers.
预计是会在3月底以前做出决定来，在4月1号公布下一期今年4月到10月的价格。
Until Taipower's upgrade plans are completed, consumers fear that the company's current issues will continue to cast a shadow over Taiwan's power supply. James Rayner and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Dozens of Taiwanese stock-listed companies have had to halt production in China's Shenzhen due to a COVID lockdown that's set to last until March 20th. Foxconn, one of Apple's main contract manufacturers, has announced it's pausing operations at 2 iPhone factories. Foxconn is a household name in Taiwan and is revered by many as a business success story. But as Bing Wang reports, the company's success has not come without controversy.
It's always the most anticipated gadget of the year, the Apple iPhone. Many of Apple's devices are manufactured in countries like China and India by contract manufacturers like the Taiwanese-owned Foxconn.
Apple is one of Foxconn's biggest clients, along with Dell, Amazon, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Foxconn's factories actually assemble 60% of the world's iPhones.
But in December last year, Apple shut down the Foxconn facility in the southern Indian city of Sri Perumbudur after employees took to the streets demanding better working conditions. Earlier that month, 150 workers were hospitalized with food poisoning from eating company-provided meals. This is just the latest in a long list of labor issues with the Taiwanese contract manufacturer.
There are long working hours. Those are long working hours. Then again, pitiable working conditions, regimented work practices. The management, especially on the inspections on the factory floor, are very stringent.
Opened in 2015, this Foxconn factory employed 17,000 people. Only 500 were called back into work when plant operations were partially resumed in January after an internal investigation. Foxconn management acknowledged there were problems and promised to implement corrective measures. But this isn't the only issue facing Foxconn. A US-based watchdog, China Labor Watch, released a report in 2019 showing that Foxconn workers in China put in 100 hours of overtime monthly, far exceeding the national legal limits of 36 hours a month. Foxconn also failed to provide workers with protective equipment, exposing them to toxic chemicals. In 2011, a Foxconn worker in a technological hub, Shenzhen, suffered an electric shock at work and was left with brain damage. In the southwestern Chinese city of Chengdu, a factory explosion killed 3 people and injured another 15.
People are trying to get these new smart projects and consume them. But on the other hand, you also have the real death of workers who have to pay with their lives or have to produce these gadgets and smartphones at the cost of their lives.
TaiwanPlus reached out to Foxconn but did not receive a response. Its founder, Terry Gou, is the 6th richest person in Taiwan. In 2020, he made a bid for president and recently helped bring 15 million doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to Taiwan. The company he founded in 1974 is now the world's largest contract manufacturer of electronics, with an annual revenue of almost $200 billion US. It contributes greatly to Taiwan's GDP and employs 1.2 million workers in a dozen countries.
That's why Foxconn is such a important company when it comes to the global supply chain. A lot of global names depend on Foxconn. They work with Foxconn to release their products at a punishing schedule. So companies like Apple, Google, they may be refreshing their products at a yearly cycle. That is, every year you get a new iPhone range coming out, and they rely on Foxconn's efficiencies and then capabilities.
The latest closure of 2 Foxconn plants in Shenzhen because of China's attempt to curb another COVID outbreak will only exacerbate existing delays on the global supply chain. But beyond supply chain problems, the labor issues remain. There have been more than 20 suicides at Foxconn plants, and the company responded by surrounding buildings with nets, hoping to catch people before they fall to their deaths.
These are very temporary, ad hoc, and stopgap kind of arrangements, in the sense that something some adversity happens and then the company comes in with its traditional apology, and there are some measures put in place, but as soon as the news value of this is over, as soon as supervision things are over, life goes back to normal.
Foxconn has apologized time and again for labor violations and promised to address the issues. But until there are long-term, concrete solutions, those employed at Foxconn feel their rights have been sacrificed for profits. Patrick Chen and Bing Wong for TaiwanPlus.
A fad in Taiwan for owning guinea pigs has led to a growing number of the animals turning up abandoned in public places. The Japanese animated series Pew Pew Monka was a big hit in Taiwan last year, prompting many people to get guinea pigs as pets. But the new owners soon found out that guinea pigs tend to reproduce quickly. This has led to unwanted guinea pigs being dumped in places like parks, where they become easy prey for local cats and dogs. Local rescue group Rodents Care says it took in more than 200 guinea pigs last year, more than 10 times the annual average before the craze began. The group is calling on the public to adopt a guinea pig and is urging current owners not to abandon their pets. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.